Hey neighbor, welcome back to ARTV. My name is John, and it's time for another episode of 7 on Sunday. Today we're looking at great bands that have that one bad album that really stands out from the lineup. I'm not always saying that bad means we're cringing and crying in a corner, shielding ourselves from how awful the music is. Bad can mean bad as in it's a notch below the quality that we've come to expect from this amazing artist, something that doesn't live up because maybe it's painfully average, boring, or yeah, maybe downright awful. 4 rules for this one. It can't be their debut album, the band has to have at least 3 albums, no collaborative albums, it must be credited to just one artist, and if I've already discussed it to death, it's not here. I need you to take this to heart when I say it. You're going to disagree with at least one pick, more than likely. And also, just because something appears here doesn't mean that I think it's the worst thing on planet Earth or that there's not any redeeming songs on the album at all. It doesn't mean that. All I'm saying is if we're headed out to the playground to play an intense, bloodying game of dodgeball, are you gonna pick the kids that look like they could be pro wrestlers, or are you gonna pick me? Bad by comparison, or maybe just bad. Anyways, I've explained it the best I can. I hope you enjoy the video. If you do, then please hit that like button, subscribe if you're new in town, and let's get started. I'm not your punching bag. I'm telling the truth. Tell Me I'm Pretty came out in 2015 and is produced by Dan Auerbach of the Black Keys. They're not a duo that I'm precisely a fan of, although I don't hate them like some do, but I genuinely don't feel that a lot of the music he's had a hand in producing has turned out all that great or creative. Cage the Elephant dropped off a batch of 10 songs, and they go for a very vintage retro rock sound, but the production doesn't do itself any favors, nor does the lazy songwriting. I feel that the cliches stand out even bigger than they do on other Cage albums, whereas before we were focusing on the music doesn't necessarily get your attention on Tell Me I'm Pretty. It's the stinging kiss of death as they fall in the crack between originality and paying tribute to older styles of music, and they just get lost as they endlessly fall into this massive spiderweb. This is a collection that mainly feels colorless, outside of a few sprouts that definitely give them new life with tracks like Trouble, Portuguese Knife Fight, and the opening track Crybaby. There's so many other moments that are utterly forgettable, and again, it comes down to their bland paint-by-the-numbers approach. What it all boils down to is a lack of direction and ingenuity, and the fact that their frontman Matt Schultz was simply not on his A-game. And if Matt's not firing on all cylinders, then you're probably not gonna have something that feels very convincing. Alone and I can't get back with my wanderlust. The now defunct R.E.M. were known as a ready, steady alternative rock band that you could count on for consistency. Yet in the late 90s into the early 2000s, they started struggling creatively. The band members didn't feel like they were getting along as well, and all of this tension led to their very uninspired 2004 effort Around the Sun. Around the Sun is a total drag. In fact, I find it hard to get through in one sitting. It's so painfully bland when it comes to the writing, to the inspirations behind the songs, the production. It can feel inconsequential to the nth degree. Everything just becomes background noise as you realize that there's not much in the way of thought-provoking lyrics or musical revelations. It's just more of a snooze fest. They bounced back with Accelerate in 08, which was actually my full album introduction to R.E.M, and they ended their career with a fine enough album Collapse Into Now in 2011, but with there being 15 albums on their back catalog, 1 out of 15 being considerably worse than the others, it's hard to get too up in arms over that. They've definitely moved on from Around the Sun, and I think we can too. This is what all of my years of defending Muse got me. An album from Muse that sounds like what people who hate Muse probably think that Muse sounds like. Simulation Theory. It's silly cheeseballs colliding in space as lyrics just sloppily explode left and right. And let's be honest, Matt has never been the biggest poet when it comes to writing lyrics. There's been some questionable ones in the past, that's for sure, but it's a lot easier to forgive them when the music's there. Most of the lyrics on this LP are trash, and I'm left wondering, well, if we don't get that, then where are the bass grooves? Where's the awesome drum fills from Dom? Because they're not really showing up either. Despite all of that, this album is not total dog shit. In fact, I think it starts off fine enough. We even have the Dark Side in there, which is an incredible late-in-the-career gem for Muse, but then after the first three, we have to get through the next three, which I guess I'll call the Hell Trilogy. Propaganda, Break It To Me, and Something Human all come back to back to back, and I don't know if my patience has ever been tested that much as a fan. As entertaining as some of the others can be in the moment, I just feel that they're mostly empty vessels that never really drop the anchor into our hearts, like even some of the messier LPs that still had some brilliant ideas like The Second Law did. Whatever, Blockades and The Dark Side are definitely worthy opponents and are excellent overall, and for now, I'll be looking forward to the future.
Put it on me like no one's watching, like it's the first time.
Bloc Party's Hymns is a very simple, straightforward effort that saw their frontman Kelly just trying to figure things out, both emotionally, vulnerably, and also dealing with the exit of a band member, a defining one that was Matt Tong, their longtime drummer. I don't want to say that one person makes or breaks a band, but Matt Tong is one of my favorite drummers probably ever, and when he leaves and goes somewhere else, and you're left cleaning up the pieces with a much slower, more brooding LP that doesn't necessarily have the most refined ideas, it's messy. I get the mood that it's going for, and when they really commit to something that's just weird enough to work, like Only He Can Heal Me or Different Drugs, I'm on board. But the problem is, we don't get that for the remainder of the tracks, and I just feel like they're kind of directionless, all over the place, and kind of empty. It's clearly a personal record for Kelly, and I do applaud the fact that he was able to open up in the ways that he did. It's just that I hate some of the synth tones here. I don't like some of the drumming, it's inconsistent as hell, and it makes me really appreciate another album that kind of came out of left field from them, like Intimacy, so much more. Hey, apparently they're recording a new album as of 2020 into 2021, so maybe this decade is gonna be a lot kinder to Bloc Party than the 2010s were outside of 4. Don't fall in love, kids, because love hurts, and one day you'll end up putting your favorite band on a list of great bands that have that one bad album. And that one bad album is Father of All Motherfuckers by Green Day. This album ain't it. It doesn't feel like they cared very much, so why should I? It gets worse with repeated listens, as you start to hear the agonizing details that it's like they've lived long enough to see themselves become the villain. Jangly, silly little songs just kind of roll by without leaving much of an impression, and if they do, it might not be a good one. They put out this album the same year that they put out something from their side project, The Network, and that Network album was light years better than this one. It proves that they still have stuff in the canon creatively, they just chose not to do it with much of anything on Father of All. I don't hate this album. I do hate a couple of the songs from it. I Was a Teenager is one of the worst things that I've ever heard Green Day put to tape, and also Meet Me on the Roof is just in one ear, out the other diarrhea. But there's also Father of All, the title track, which really grew on me a whole lot. In fact, I really do like that song. Also Sugar Youth and Graffitia, they still stand out to at least have some big strength to them. It's hard to forgive the lazy phoned-in songwriting, the recycled ideas that seem to borrow even from their own back catalog, and that awful album cover that just shit all over the iconic American Idiot. I'm going to close my eyes and pretend it didn't happen, and it seems like Green Day are doing the same thing, because I went to Hella Mega Tour, and they didn't play a single song from this album.
Write it, cut it, paste it, save it, load it, check it, quickly write it, plug it, play it, burn it, rip it, drag it, drop it, zip and zip.
The Robots have arrived at number 2. This is Daft Punk's Weakest Limb by a comfortable margin. It's Human After All that came out in 2005. To human is to err, I suppose, but Human After All is just straight up not fun to listen to. And Daft Punk not being fun or emotionally resonant, it feels like they were reducing fractions in order to give us the most simplistic cube they could. Ideas burn themselves down time and time again as they start these run-on sentences that might have a good idea or a catchy groove or something that you think is going to build and go somewhere, but instead They just let it torch and light the match, and it goes up inside out. Redeeming tracks do happen. I think the title track, the opening song Human After All, is great. I also have love for Steam Machine and the kind of warped groove that it gets into, and the transition on-off that really maneuvers effortlessly into Television Rules the Nation. But outside of that, I can't say there's much to sink your teeth into at all, which is definitely an abnormality for a duo that definitely gave us a lot of meat on the bone.
See my reflection in the window. It looks different, so different than what you see.
Remember when I said no collab albums for the list? We all know that I was looking Metallica dead in the eyes on that one for Lulu, but I wanted to talk about Saint Anger, which I've never really spoken about at length on my channel. It came out in 2003, and it sounds like it was recorded inside of a fucking tin can. Hey guys, look, I'm gonna be Lars Ulrich in the early 2000s. Hey, where's my snare, guys? I think my snare drum needs to be even louder.
Where's my snare?
I get why people have problems with the load, reload era of Metallica. I mean, they were coming out of the Black Album, but I would take them dipping into Southern metal, or whatever you want to call it, with some moments of brilliance, instead of whatever the fuck we got on Saint Anger. You're telling me that I need to be on board with the version of Metallica that has no guitar solos, terrible production, bad songwriting that sounds like it was done by an angry teenager, and also that fucking snare drum that Lars just will not stop beating into the ground? No fucking thank you. When I started working on this video, I made sure that I listened to every single album I was set to feature just to make sure that my thoughts weren't clouded with other people's opinions. And with Saint Anger, people talk shit about this album online all the time, so I went in thinking maybe it won't be that bad, and I walked away saying, I can't believe I made it through that in one sitting. Many times I feel like I can sympathize and try to see where a band is coming from, but with this Metallica album, I genuinely feel confused as to how they could put this out and to how they could still defend it to this day. As Lars Ulrich said in 2021, those snare drums were the truth at the time. I'm sorry, but this is a 0 out of 5 type of album for me. I just don't get any sort of enjoyment. In fact, it's more like torture than it is anything related to happiness and serotonin going off in the brain. Thanks for watching another episode of 7 on Sunday and for supporting this series by liking and sharing. If there's an album from a band that you love that you just can't stand or flat out hate, then let me know in the comments down below, and check out these videos on screen. They're ones that I think you'll like if you enjoyed this video. Outside of that, follow me on socials. The link tree is in the description down below, and I'll be back soon with more on ERTV.